Hey there, guys. Welcome back to our dual commentary of Assassin's Creed 2. I am once again joined by Pcol for this dual commentary.
It's me.
And right now we are doing the sequence where we will be escorting Leonardo to Venice. And this will take us to the mountains, this will take us to Forli. Forli is one of the most forgetful cities in this game because you don't really do anything important in Forli. You go there once just to get passage to Venice, and then you go there in a DLC, which is not really a DLC at this point because it's been integrated with the full game now.
Foley is just a worse San Gimignano.
Pretty much, yeah, and it's always dirty with a lot of water everywhere, and yeah, the city is in a very poor state. And Katarina as a character, I don't feel like she's done that well as a character. I mean, aside from the DLC where she does show her extremities in her behavior when she's you'll know what I mean when I get to that DLC.
Because I think that was also like a real historical thing that happened. Because this is when Assassin's Creed actually used to care about history.
And now they pretty much do stupid things like making the pyramids being built 2,000 years after they were already built for Egypt. That is dumb.
Also, I love how like talking to that one guy counts as like an entire mission.
Yeah, that's funny, but that's just part of the typical mission structure of Assassin's Creed 2. It's a bunch of smaller missions compounded into one large mission, and it might seem a little strange that would be given a task, but since you can't replay memories on this game, you pretty much have to class all that as being part of one single memory. So in actuality, there are 14 big memories with a bunch of smaller sub memories included with them. So yeah, I'm not gonna judge it too harshly on that. But I wanted to address a point that Pcol had brought up earlier in one of our videos. I believe Pcol had mentioned that the atlas that I'm using right now for Assassin's Creed, it doesn't have any mention of the DLCs of Odyssey, but I found a passage that brings up a bit of a confusion. Because there's no telling if the Fate of Atlantis DLC showcases events that are true or not, because Alethea does a very poor job at explaining if the events that occurred within those simulations that Cassandra goes through are real or not. But I found something about Atlantis, and it says that after the success of the Anthropos project, which created a docile and exploitable humankind, Juno and her husband Aita left for the city of Atlantis. Despite their formal ban by Poseidon, they carried out various experiments on humanity, giving life to hybrid creatures such as sphinxes, minotaurs, and cyclopses. See, the last part of that doesn't really make any sense because obviously, like the whole idea of BOWs and like creatures being made by pieces of Eden, the way it was presented in that simulation doesn't really make any sense and doesn't fit within the lore of Assassin's Creed, and it just feels like very cheap writing. And there's no possible way any of these creatures could have existed in the world of Assassin's Creed because Assassin's Creed is not based on mythology. That just presents as a bit of confusion. Like, Picol, do you by chance know if Alethea considers those simulations to be actual real memories of the Isu that actually happened?
I think they were meant to be like memories of the Isu that Cassandra like relived. I don't know if it was like Cassandra like as herself in the memories, but it just showed as herself for the purposes of gameplay or something. I don't know. Everything in Odyssey is like poorly explained anyway.
Yeah, but this atlas, given that it's meant to convey true information, it almost gives the impression everything that happened in the Fate of Atlantis DLC is actually how Isu history turned out, which of course doesn't make any sense because if Juno was entirely evil, why would she be made a member of the Capitoline Triad if they knew she was evil?
Those events, like, I think they're supposed to happen before, like, the Capitoline Triad was even made. So, like, if she was already evil by that point, why was she even allowed to be on the Triad?
Yeah, and they don't explain any kind of justification as to why, even after everything she's done, she becomes a member of the Capitoline Triad. So dumb.
Like, I'm pretty sure Odyssey was released after the comics where Juno was killed, so they randomly just included Juno in the DLC for no reason other than, like, fan servers and be like, "Ooh, it's Juno, remember when she was so evil?"
I think Ubisoft had like a sense of self-realization when they realized that they weren't taking Juno's story anywhere, so they just decided to kill her off because she was a liability.
Well, they're not even taking any of the news stories anywhere.
Every game after Assassin's Creed 3 has just been a side story, even if like AC4 was a great game. So disappointing.
This is why I want to consider everything after AC4 as non-canon, even if it is canon.
pretty much. But we have this unique set piece mission right here. So this is the very first time Assassin's Creed embraced the carriage mission. And this is a very tough carriage sequence to do without taking any damage, but who cares? Just
I've tried to do it multiple times and I've never been able to do it.
I think it's a very fun set piece. It takes advantage of physics. I mean, even if at times the controls for the carriage aren't the best, it's an interesting concept of being able to smash enemies into walls and using these trees over here to knock them off.
It's fun doing clothesline on the enemies.
Yeah. The general gist of this carriage sequence right here is whenever the enemies are on the side, try to ram them into the invisible barriers on the side or into rocks. And then when they're on top, try to navigate under a branch and that'll knock them off. When they get close to you, just mash circle.
I've never, like, not mashed circle, so I don't actually know what happens.
Yeah, I imagine it just kills you flat out. Once I kill every single enemy except for the Brute, I just screw around with the Brute. But this at least gives us time to talk about some tangents here and there. And let's talk about Moon Knight. Did you watch the latest episode of Moon Knight, Pcol?
Yeah. It was so weird, but I also still had issues with it again.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like there are definitely points within me where I was like, I should definitely criticize this because there are some points of clear cliches here and there. But at the same time, it was an interesting take. The horror element wasn't going anywhere. They introduced that zombie mummy out of the blue, and then you never see it again.
I wish they did more of it, because it was actually like an interesting like thing that they could have done, and then they just killed it off for no reason. Even though like there's clearly supposed to be more of them, because you see and hear arrows and men shooting at other ones.
Yeah, and it's the same as in Spider-Man 2. I never understood this about Doc Ock in Spider-Man 2, but why is it that they show this whole horror moment where he kills all those doctors, and then it leads up to him being a very cheesy villain saying really stupid one-liners and robbing banks and the like? Why do you use a horror background as the foundation for a cheesy villain? That's one of my main problems with Spider-Man 2, and I really find Spider-Man 2 to be a very overrated film. But relating back to the point I was addressing, like horror elements in the Marvel movies, I don't feel like they do anything that's substantial, you know?
Yeah, that's why I wish they did more of the fucking undead priests, because like the clicking that they were making, like it honestly reminded me of the clickers from The Last of Us.
I know, same thing as well.
Yeah, I was like, is this The Last of Us right now? And then they just killed it off, and it was like, okay, I guess we're done with that forever.
Yeah. And then you get this whole psychedelic moment where Harrow shoots Steven, and then Steven gets his life flashing before his eyes or something, or whatever that place is, that psychedelic realm.
Yeah.
Wonder what that's about. Like, for all I know, that's
a thing from the comics where like he's like in like a psych ward, and like we don't know what's real or not.
If that's supposed to be that Marvel equivalent to the Field of Reeds or the Duat, that is strange. But I don't know what the whole point of that was, or how his mind is even transported there. That's confusing.
I also don't get, like, how is the tomb in the shape of the Eye of Horus? Like, that's so stupid. They literally said it was a maze with, like, 6 different paths, and he drew the Eye of Horus on, like, the table or whatever, but there was, like, no indication of, like, where they were in the tomb on the Eye of Horus, and it was, like, only like 2 paths they could have gone in the shape of the Eye of Horus, and they just like randomly chose a path and managed to get the right one for no reason.
And not to mention that on the Eye of Horus, a lot of those line segments are just separate from one another, like space in between them.
They
so
don't even connect.
Yeah, they don't even connect. So how did he know it was the Eye of Horus? Yeah, this actually leads me on to Assassin's Creed, because when he's mentioned the 6 senses from the Eye of Horus, I immediately thought of Juno's message in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood when she was talking about the idea of humans and then the Isu's 6th sense. What did he say was the 6th sense in Moon Knight? I mean, he mentioned all the typical normal human senses, but he mentioned something about 6 senses. What was the 6th one?
I don't remember. I didn't even like feel like an Assassin's Creed reference in that.
Yeah, but like the moment he said 6 references, I just thought of Juno, and I'm like, maybe that was one of the inspirations. Yeah, maybe that was one of the inspirations that Patrice Delisette took when designing the older Assassin's Creed games.
I was just too caught up on like how stupid it was that the thing was shaped in the Eye of Horus.
I don't know, but yeah, it was an interesting idea to learn about what the Eye of Horus represented. I mean, it being a maze, That's rather
Yeah.
odd. But I'm guessing, remember when Layla goes to that part of the tomb and there's like a bunch of empty space and she's trying to hug the wall as she's trying to not fall. Maybe
Yeah.
those points of falling represent like the spaces in between the line segments that don't connect with each other on the Eye of Horus, for all we know.
I don't even know. It just doesn't make any sense. Also, when she fights the priest and like they roll over the cliff, she like rolls like way farther down than the edge of the cliff. So there's like no way she would have been able to climb back up.
Yeah, it reminds me of Transformers Prime because I remember one episode of Transformers Prime where Unicron was resurrecting from the Earth, and then Raph and Jack's mother were almost sucked into a tornado before Bumblebee saved them, and then Jack's mom literally flies off the hood of the car, and yet she's somehow behind the hood. How is that possible? That's so confusing.
Also, did you notice that the Tomb Buster movie in the Psych Ward was clearly a reference to Tomb Raider?
I thought it was a reference to Indiana Jones, not really the Tomb
Well, yeah, I think
Raider.
it was meant to be Indiana Jones, but like, if it was meant to be more Indiana Jones, they would have called it like Indy Johns or something.
But one has to wonder how on earth Stephen Grant is still alive. I mean, obviously it makes sense why he wouldn't be dead, because Moon Knight is 6 episodes, but Khonshu left him. He doesn't have the healing armor, and somehow he gets transported into a plane where he feels that everything is fake, and Arthur Harrow is somehow influencing everything that's happening. How does that make
And
any
like
sense?
everyone he knows in his life is there for some reason as another patient.
Or as doctors as well. And
Yeah.
then Moon Knight is a doll, and all this kind of stuff.
And then there's like the third guy in the other coffin that they don't open.
Hmm. I mean, one has to wonder if that's actually something Arthur Harrow is creating, or it's actually something that Steven's consciousness is creating. Because obviously we know Mark is the original personality. Steven is an alter, but is Steven the one that's kind of passively creating that? Because Steven initially was very hesitant to the whole idea of there being multiple personalities or a god, this and that, and I don't know. Like it doesn't really make any sense why they would take it to that plane. I mean, I saw a lot of people in reviews saying that that was actually a cool idea, but I don't know. It just came out of the blue, and it's just this is my main problem with magic in a lot of media. I never like it when any kind of media just uses magic as sort of the baseline explanation for everything, because I feel like with magic, it's so easy to come up with another contrived name, a contrived set piece, a contrived element. Like, oh, here's a magic spell that you didn't know about, and we just happen to set it up in the episode that you're watching, and just out of the
Yeah.
blue. That's just what I don't like about these kind
It's
of
like
magical stuff, you know?
people like they set up these things that are like, oh, it's so magical and powerful, but they don't explain like what it is or why it is the way it is, or like how powerful it is. They
Yeah,
just
I
like
know.
set it up and it's like this is meant to be like a powerful object or whatever, but like they don't explain why it's powerful or how it's powerful, and they just like say it's powerful and expect you to believe it.
Or they introduce such powerful objects or spells, but then for some reason a character doesn't bother to utilize these kind of spells or anything just to bypass some kind of dangerous situation. And it feels like a jump the shark moment. It just feels like cheap writing. I feel like when you use magic or supernatural elements as your baseline explanation for everything, it just leads to cheap writing. It's like with Silent Hill, for instance. Silent Hill introduced like so many of these really dumb magical objects and magical elements and magical planes, this and that, just out of the blue. And it's like, what are we going to be introduced to
That's
next? Like,
that's why the clickers and stuff in The Last of Us works, because it's not magic. It's based in reality. Because cordyceps is a real mushroom, and it like what it does in the game is actually real, even though it only affects ants and not humans.
yeah, it's just there's a lot more effort put into establishing why these things exist compared to what it's like with
Yeah.
supernatural or magical based games or any kind of media. And ironically, like Ghostwire Tokyo, which is a game based on the supernatural, doesn't do this. There's always an explanation for everything that's not based on just magic entirely. And even if it is based on magic, there are actual explanations given in the lore as to why these exist. They don't just pull ideas out of the blue. Like they actually make sure everything is established in the beginning before the game exists, and they don't just pull stuff out of the blue. So it's nice that it does that, you know?
Yeah, Xenoblade kind of does the same thing, because like Xenoblade doesn't really have like magic, but it has like stuff called ether, which is like it's kind of like the building block of like all life and whatever. But like Xenoblade takes place in a different universe than like real world, which is where Xeno comes from because Xeno is alien and Greek. They still like explain everything, and then at the end of like Xenoblade 1 and at Xenoblade 2, you learn that like the universe that you're in was created by a scientist that was like trying to create a new universe. So he does like an experiment with a special magical object that was like found in Africa or whatever. And then everything gets sent into a different universe and like the world gets destroyed, and like in Xenoblade 3 we see the worlds combine because they're combining both of the worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2 and 3.
I see. The writers established the set of rules that fit within the universe that
Yeah.
they're basing it in. Like this is why this is something that Ben 10 actually summarizes really well, because there was an episode of Ben 10 Omniverse where this all-powerful wizard says he doesn't like overpowered magic. He likes traditional street magic and like he likes the set of rules right there. When you're watching that episode, you might be thinking, why do you hate like overpowered magic rather than street magic? But then I realized it leads to a greater picture, and it's what I'm discussing right now. And it's like there's a set of rules that are established within games or any kind of media based around science that actually demands effort and doesn't feel like it's pulled out of the blue. And it's like, if you're going to be introducing stuff out of thin air, then why don't you just introduce this new concept out of thin air so that the main character is just able to scrape by it so easily, you know?
When they like actually clearly explained how the animus works in old Assassin's Creed games, and nowadays they're just like, well, you can like make an entire simulation out of memories and like choose what memory you want to do because of dialogue options that don't actually exist.
Or they say that the Piece of Eden magically has the ability to create mythical beings like Cyclopses, the Hecatoncheires, Sphinxes. Like, it's never been established before in the previous games. I mean, aside from the Curse of the Pharaohs DLC, because I believe all those pharaohs were meant to be like generated by the apple, which is rather strange.
Well,
I don't
that's
know.
like the light version of how it worked in the Odyssey DLC. Odyssey just took it to the extreme because that's just what Odyssey does.
Yeah, like apparently the Isu were using the devices, the Piece of Edens, as a way to create BOWs, bioorganic weapons, basically, just manipulating an already existing life form through a Piece of Eden to transform into a creature. Like, really? That's
Like, I know you haven't played the Odyssey DLCs or like Odyssey in general, but like literally one of the side missions you can do in the Fate of Atlantis DLC literally has someone turn into a freaking werewolf and kill people.
yeah, and then there's like three-headed dogs. You kill Cerberus and get his apple in episode 2. And then you kill the Hecatoncheires in episode 3 because apparently Juno thought that was her ultimate weapon. Uh, they really
And
got
they're
Juno
all
wrong
just
right there.
damage sponge enemies because Odyssey's a badly designed game.
Yeah. It just becomes a shit show. It just becomes a muddy mess. Like, this is another reason why I don't like Magic and the like, because it only serves to convolute the storyline. It only serves to convolute the universe that it's based in. And that's what we got with Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Origins, because they just made a mess of everything related to lore. Like, Assassin's Creed used to
Gonna
operate...
do magic, you should explain how it works and like why it is the way that it is, and not just be like, oh, we have this thing and we're gonna tell you that it's powerful and you should just believe us because that's the story we want to tell.
Yeah, I know. It's just Assassin's Creed used to operate within a certain set of rules in its universe, but now it's just become a fantasy land. It's become a wizard game, basically. Like I bet they
That's why I don't really like Harry Potter, because like Harry Potter's just like, oh, magic because we can do magic for no reason.
No, I don't feel like it's the same case with Harry Potter. I mean, sometimes it is, but I don't really feel it as much with the Harry Potter movies. But I think that's just a general problem. You have to not overdo it so much with the games or with your movies or your books. Like, the more you add, to that universe, like, the more books, the more games, the more movies that you do for a series, the more you just convolute the timeline, and the more you're going to be resorting to just pulling ideas out of thin air just to make it appealing to your audience. Like, there is a skill to brevity, and this is why I say brevity is the soul of wit. Brevity is a skill because it doesn't convolute your timeline.
Like the main guy who makes a Xenoblade, he was literally like planning out Xenoblade 2 and 3 like while he was making Xenoblade 1, and he was planning out Xenoblade 3 while he was making Xenoblade 2. So like he was literally planning out his entire story for like 15 years while he was making his previous games to make the current games that he's making now. And I
Really,
wouldn't be
that far
surprised if
ahead?
he's planning out Xenoblade 4 right now while he's making Xenoblade 3.
That far ahead? That is
Yeah.
impressive. That
And
is
like
really
even
impressive.
before Xenoblade, he made other Xeno games, which were Xenosaga and Xenogears. He was probably planning out Xenosaga while he was making Xenogears, and probably planning out Xenoblade while he was making Xenosaga.
I mean, to me, that just doesn't sound possible for a developer to think that far ahead because
Well, he did.
finances. Well, finances is a huge factor to consider, and then you have the higher ups, and the higher ups have to accept your idea or not, and
Yeah,
it's
well,
hard to
that's why
do that.
Xenogears got canceled, because Xenogears had like a rush development, it was like really delayed and stuff. So then he like left Square Enix and like made his own company, which is the company that made Xenosaga and Xenoblade. So then they made Xenosaga, and then after 3 Xenosaga games, they were like, "Oh, this is too much, and we can't make all of this, even though it was meant to be like a 6-part story." And then they got bought out by Nintendo, and then Nintendo was like, "Hey, do you want to make this new series for us?" And then they called it Xenoblade to reference his previous works, and now Xenoblade is like the biggest series.
Yeah, it's one thing to like think so far ahead, but like actually putting that into practical use and actually doing all that within the rules that we've established as a society when it comes to finances, it's something else entirely, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Well, I
it's
think
really
it
tough to
worked with
do that.
Xenoblade because Xenoblade has like such a huge following compared to like Xenogears and Xenosaga.
Nice. So we're back playing as Desmond right now, and Lucy is giving us some exposition right here. So this is introducing us to the bleeding effect. So this is essentially how Desmond learns. So he basically, through his experiences in the Animus and through reliving Ezio's memories, in the sense that he felt that he was Ezio. Oh, look, that's right here. This is very strange. So we're actually in some void right now, and they didn't load in any other assets for the city, so that's how they made all this.
I think
Yeah,
the buildings are supposed to be like the same buildings that you see in Florence, so I think this big place is supposed to be in Florence.
yeah, I believe so. But as I was saying, this is meant to be introducing us to the bleeding effect and how Desmond is able to pick up on Ezio's skills. And they messed up the bleeding effect in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but I can't go into much detail about that because I haven't fully watched LaserZ's live stream of episode 2 of the Fate of Atlantis DLC. But just to give you an idea as to what the bleeding effect is, the bleeding effect is essentially what allows someone in the present day to pick up on the memories and skills of their ancestors to put it to practical use in the present day. Yeah.
But it also makes you go insane because your memories and the memories of your ancestors fucking compete in the same body.
Yeah, I mean there is a sense to it. I feel like there is a realistic sense to it. I can understand why this would cause hallucinations, why this would lead to distortions between past and present day memories through prolonged use. It makes a lot of sense for that to be the case
Yeah.
because, of course, you succumb to fatigue, you end up having imprints established in your brain a bit, and I guess in some cases the memories can be very traumatic when you're reliving them through your ancestor. That it's almost like you're reliving them yourself, even though you weren't actually there during that time. And it almost reminds me of Spider-Man because the new Spider-Man series, the 2018 one, Marvel Spider-Man, there is a whole arc where Doc Ock actually occupies Spider-Man's mind, and even though he hasn't actually witnessed any memories of Spider-Man or Peter Parker, he still actually relives some of that because it's all embedded within Peter Parker's subconscious. And in a way, it could relate to what the bleeding effect is, or why Clay, for instance, has trouble understanding what time he's in, or at times he speaks a different language, or even with Daniel Cross. Daniel Cross does the same thing as well. So there is definitely a lot of sense to it, and it's pretty cool of an idea. But they ruined it in the later Assassin's Creed games, or didn't bother establishing upon it. And this right here, this is us reliving Altair's memories. So this is one of the rare moments where Desmond is able to connect with his ancestor without actually being in the Animus. Now, I think this is the only time this is really established in the game. Am I correct?
I think so. Because like every other time we see bleeding effect is just like in a cutscene.
Yeah, this right here, that's Maria. So this is right after Assassin's Creed Bloodlines takes place. So this is when Altair and Maria are committed to love right now. And I don't really understand the whole significance of the horses in that loading screen. What's the whole point of that, I wonder?
I don't even know. But I love how you can like fight all the people here and like kill them and they don't fight back. And like even when you were in like the big space before, like all the ghosts and stuff were like still like physical, so you could like still interact and touch them.
Yeah, and also like it's cool that in this is one of the few cases where Ubisoft back in the days when they were good actually built the entirety of Acre around the narrative. So rather than build the story around the open world design, they built the open world around the narrative. So this is a great example of them actually putting time and effort into putting Acre as just a small moment in the game for you to play.
Even though it's just like this one area.
Yeah, but something important to really take away from this, and I watched this on LaserZ's stream, or not really on his stream, but in his retrospective of Assassin's Creed 2, but this introduces us to the concept of how genetic memory works, because there is a moment where after Altair does the leap of faith from up top, after he has sex with Maria, Desmond asks the question, why is he not following Altair? And then it zooms in on Maria's womb. It zooms in on her uterus, and I didn't understand what that meant, and I just thought, oh, they just did that for a bit of sex fun, this and that. But it turns out, I don't know why this didn't occur to me sooner, but obviously with genetic memory, the moment Altair's progeny is born, like the moment his baby is born, that is when we stop actually tracking Altair, because if we're examining Altair's memories through genetic memory, we can't possibly examine Altair's memories after his baby is born, because obviously the baby is the one that passes the genetic data across the ancestors. So yeah, that was an interesting point that Laser Z brought up. And I can't believe I never thought of it like that. I feel like an idiot for not thinking about that when it comes to genetic memory. Like, you know what I mean, Nicole?
Yeah, that's like so weird because like obviously the baby isn't even born yet, so you're like reliving a person who's not even born, which
Well,
is
it's a
like
fertilized sperm
weird.
cell. It's a fertilized sperm cell that I think that's what it's trying to show right there. But apparently, the sperm cell has memories. It's like it's the point at which memory starts is from the sperm cell. I mean, is that I don't know if that's actually true in biology, but I'd have to look that up.
I mean, genetic memory isn't even real, so like who knows?
Like it could be though. It's just we haven't explored it very well because like obviously like Desmond brought up this whole argument to Warren Vidic, but then Warren Vidic just was like, "Do you really want to argue about semantics?" Like, for all we know, genetic memory could be a real thing. It's just the way we unlock these genes is very different. And, like, we haven't really figured out the best way to get these genes to express themselves so that we can actually pick upon the skills of our ancestors and the like. But this is the moment where apparently Altair's child is born. So all memories of Altair's life after his progeny is born we cannot access through the animus, through genetic memory, unless we somehow gain access to a blood sample that actually contains Altair's memories after this point right here, which I was actually going. Let me actually pause this right here because I want to touch more upon this point right here. Like, I was thinking back when in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but I thought there were moments where Layla was actually reliving memories through blood samples that shouldn't have been possible.
There's the two blood samples on the spear, and then the game is like you want to choose which one to follow, even though that's not how it works.
Oh yeah, that's right. I was going to mention that, but remember how in Legacy of the First Blade, Episode 2, Cassandra's child is born, and then this
I don't
led
know
me
that
on.
yet.
Yeah, but when does Fate of Atlantis take place? Does it take place after Legacy of the First Blade or before Legacy of the First Blade?
I would assume it takes place after it.
But if it takes place after Legacy of the First Blade, and the blood sample is on the spear. Like, whose blood is it, though? Is it Cassandra's blood? Because if it is Cassandra's blood, we should not be able to see her memories after Elpidios is born. It shouldn't be possible.
We shouldn't even be able to see Cassandra's memories in general, because that's not how the fucking thing was supposed to work in the first place. And like, Cassandra used the spear to kill like thousands of people, so there should be more than like two strands of blood on the spear.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the part that confused me. I'm not too sure exactly how Layla is reliving Cassandra's memories in Fate of Atlantis if her child was born on that day in Legacy of the First Blade. It's
Well, like, her child also gets killed, so like, I guess the Am is just like, okay, well, there's no direct descendant, so I guess I'll just go back to Cassandra. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I'd have to look at that again because I think I told myself at one point, oh, it wasn't actually wrong because the way Layla relives Cassandra's memories was not through a direct blood sample from Cassandra, but something else entirely. I don't know. That's what's confusing me. And
It's
then
just
like
confusing because Odyssey doesn't explain anything.
and that's another thing as well. Remember how in Assassin's Creed Odyssey the Animus is a VR headset? How do you put a blood sample on there? How do you put a blood sample inside of a headset?
What's a VR headset and in the laying down position thing? It's both. And I'm pretty sure it was also still a VR headset in Origins.
No,
Wait,
it
no, it
wasn't a
wasn't.
VR.
I'm,
It
I'm
it
wrong.
it wasn't a VR headset in Origins. It was an actual. It was the same model that they used in Assassin's Creed One, only it's upgraded now. Um, yeah, it leaves a lot of questions.
Well, like, in the comics, there's like a VR headset Animus that was like made way before Odyssey, because like Abstergo Entertainment made it as like a gaming headset thing. That's probably where Ubisoft got the term simulation from, because they thought everything was a simulation from that.
Yeah, I mean the ECU already view everything as a simulation, as Laser Z pointed out in Assassin's Creed Origins. Because obviously with their ability to see time or like read that data, it comes across as math. It comes across as simulation, basically. Like you're running a simulation to see the proper probability of these events occurring in the future, which is
Yeah,
what the Issue
except
Sixth Sense
Odyssey
is.
said that the sixth sense was knowledge, even though knowledge is not like a physical, tangible thing you can do.
I mean, the only thing I could think of as to how Ubisoft would explain that is that knowledge is the name of the Isu's ability to see time and read that data. That's the only thing I could think of, but it's never explained like that in Assassin's Creed Odyssey in Episode 3.
They treat knowledge as like a thing you can like hold and touch. Because people were stupid and thought that when Juno was talking about knowledge and brotherhood, she thought it was like physical knowledge that she put in a physical box.
Is it possible that Layla is potentially reliving Cassandra's memories of the fate of Atlantis through the Staff of Hermes? Because Alethea is there? Maybe she did something to allow that to happen? I don't know.
I don't even know anymore, because Odyssey doesn't explain anything.
Yeah, but that's the point of this kind of video series that we're doing, is just to bring up a lot of these plot holes. But let's continue on right here. So you see right here that I zoom in on her just to showcase the idea of how genetic memory actually works. And see, he's asking right here, why is he not following Altair? And he's stuck with Maria because Altair's memories that he can actually view through his own DNA end right there. Because obviously we're using Desmond's DNA to track the life of Altair. And of course, because Seth is the next progeny in that genetic data, that's why we can view Altair's memories after this point. That's why he's staying with Maria, because that's how genetic memory works. And I think Desmond actually says that that is actually how it works, because he says right here, like he doesn't actually say it, but he says, "Oh shit, that must mean." Yeah, he says that must mean. So I think he understood that's how genetic data works, and he just calls it a weird dream.
Yeah, also, one other thing I don't get is that, like, when you start the sex sequence, like, Desmond literally says that Maria's the woman from Acre, even though this is supposed to be after Bloodlines, and Acre was not in Bloodlines at all. They were in a completely different city.
I see what you mean right there. You meet Maria in Jerusalem, right? In
Yeah,
AC1? Hmm.
because she's taking the place of Robert to, like, trick Altair into not going to Arsuf.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and also, one thing I wanted to point out right here is I actually found out through Long-Eared Fox's Assassin's Creed Revelations retrospective that apparently the whole idea of Lucy being a Templar wasn't actually the plan. Apparently, the reason why Lucy was killed off is because her actor, like her voice actor, wished for additional royalties from Patrice Desolé, but he couldn't provide that, and so she was kicked off the show out of spite, apparently.
I think before AC1 released, she also, like, leaked that she was voicing a character in the game.
So that created a bit of a grudge between Patrice and her voice actor.
I think so. I don't think it was an intentional leak. I think she did it on accident, but she still, like, leaked that she was playing a character in AC1.
Yeah, but that does suck that she got kicked off of Assassin's Creed because she tried to ask for additional royalties from Patrice
Yeah.
Desolé.
I think that's, like, almost the same reason why, like, in Iron Man 1, Terrence Howard was supposed to be War Machine, but then it just randomly got changed to Don Cheadle in Iron Man 2.
I think the original actor was a little too greedy. I think it was for that reason. But do you see anything in Lucy's behavior that would indicate that she is a Templar? I mean, let's go back over here. Let's go back to this moment right here where she's holding her hands to her face out of anxiety at the idea that the team of assassins that were sent were killed. But why is she conveying that? Like, what's the whole point of that?
I mean, she could just be faking it to like stay on their good side or something. I don't know.
But they're not seeing her screen. They don't know what's on their computer screens. So why would she need to do this act? I mean, it's clear, like, at this point in Assassin's Creed 2, I don't think they planned on Lucy being a Templar. It was only when the actor got fired that they decided to have Lucy be a Templar, probably.
That's why you gotta be like the Xenoblade creator and plan things out for like 15 years in advance.
Yeah, but there's no way the Xenoblade creator could possibly plan on firing actors alike, or they potentially die or anything.
That's why they make a JRPG with young actors. With like young kids, because that's how all JRPGs work, because all the protagonists are like 18 years old.
That seems like a very interesting way to plan for that, Pcol. Just hire nothing but young actors for Xenoblade.
Because that's just how JRPGs work.
Yeah, okay. I guess that's an interesting explanation. But this is the end of this sequence. So we're now in Venice in 1481.
Best city, best city.
Definitely. I have been screwing around in Venice after this recording. Like, after this recording, I screwed around in Venice, but didn't actually start the main mission. So, yeah, I had just screwed around with the guards, bought some things. I even found some codex pages, but I'll showcase all that in the next part. This concludes this part of our dual commentary. Stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.
Yeah.